Hello YouTubers, Joe Kersey here on December 26, 2016, Boxing Day for those in the appropriate countries and cultures at 15:25 in the afternoon Eastern Time. I hope you all had a great day of wretched excess. Hopefully enlivened by some degree of attendance at a church service or celebration of your choice. I'm going to start today's little video with, as my mother liked to say, let's talk about happy things. My son just got back from Dayton, where he was seeing his sister-in-law, and then his in-laws were there as well. And they spent Christmas Day there. They drove over Christmas morning. And clearly they waited to go home, come back today, and I don't blame them, and I'm glad they did. But he sent me a picture of Carter, my grandson, as he phrases it in his title to his picture. You know, Carter enjoying the wretched excess. So I'll show you it here. That's a lot of fun, guys. It's a lot of fun. Now onto the more sobering side of today's sagas. Actually, I jumped the gun on that a bit. Paul came over at 12:30. Of course, while I was in the can. Bang, 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 bang. Bang, 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 bang. I'll be there, I'll be there, I'll be there. Has never failed since he's left. Doesn't matter whether I go at 9, 9:30, 8:30, 12, 1, 2 in the afternoon. Just, it's like a homing pigeon. I guess he was probably checking for mail, I guess. He hadn't gotten any mail since last week. But he had been up to Delaware to get his window fixed, his driver's door window fixed on his truck, because it died on him. And they said it was a combination of a bad motor and bad software. And so they replaced the motor, which it sounded like it had an integral regulator arm without having to have a separate regulator arm, but I couldn't tell from the invoice he showed me. But there were 3 entries in the invoice talking about how they adjusted software. So anyways, all under warranty, so he didn't have to pay anything. So good, except for his time and hassle of having to deal with that. Fortunately, it was a warm day. Hell, it's been almost 60 here. It's 61 right now, and it's been a very mild day. It was 48 this morning. Now, I generally don't like to open cans of worms, but when I do, I certainly want to go fishing with them and complete the fishing trip. So I described a certain amount of frustration on Christmas Eve. And I thought I'd give you the full sort of end of the story of that. I did go to church on Christmas morning. We were a stalwart crew of 10 on Christmas Day. 12 if you count the 2 that came in just before we started. Well, they came in just before the communion part of the service started. So we were 12 to be 12 for communion. Let's put it that way. Um, I got, I told you, well, I'll tell you some more here. It's, my judge friend was one of the readers, and then this other fellow who I will call, I'll call him Don. No real name for him because my jury is still out on Don. Don is clearly a very pious fellow. He has his own, well, like all people have their own sense of piety. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But his is expressed somewhat unusually by a lot of low-grade muttering and the jury's still out on Don. Anyway, he's a lay reader, and apparently he'd been a lay reader at his previous churches, and apparently he's had a fairly mobile history. A lot of it, he's clearly originally from the Deep South, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like people from the Deep South. Unlike a lot of people from the Deep South, he does not have a particularly charming accent. I'll just leave it at that. So he and my judge friend were reading. Well, when I go in, of course, I was glad to yak with Henry because my judge friend, because he'd watched my little discussion the other day, the initial crack of the can of worms. And he well, he says, what are you doing? He says, I said, I'm going to church. He says, do you want a crucifer? I said, sure. So I was the crucifer. So we had actually up on the altar platform for this service that contained all of 10 people, and that counts all the people on the altar platform. That's counting the rector, his wife, everybody. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I enjoy doing that. I mean, I was glad to take part in it. I think the underlying thread of my beef the other day was, I like to take part in things, and if you volunteer and aren't let know, you're not told one way or the other. You sort of wonder where you stand. All right, I let my friend Tony over in the UK no, I said just back from church, a total of 12 stalwart souls, and that includes the interim rector and me. I said, I crucified. That was a misprint. I crucified and acolyted. And the judge and, what did I call this guy, Don or something, read. My jury's still out on whatever name I adopted here just now a few minutes ago. I ferreted out what happened yesterday. And this happened because well, let's say one of my spies. I don't want to implicate anybody. One of my spies came in just as we were getting undressed, we're getting our albs off to go home after the service. And she says that no readers at all had been assigned at all for the 4:30 service yesterday afternoon, or Christmas Day afternoon. No, Christmas Eve afternoon. Christmas Eve afternoon. For the family family-friendly service. So the interim rector read, and so did one of the vestry members. One outstanding family, the Ross family, their kids read, and well, no, they didn't read. They chaliced and they acolyted or whatever, you know. And the 16-year-old guy is, you know, he's been reading a couple of years. He's very good, and there's no reason he shouldn't be doing the wine now, since at 16 you become a full voting member of a congregation in the U.S. Episcopal Church. Which is, you know, very good. He's an excellent guy. I mean, these kids are outstanding individuals, and the parents are outstanding individuals. My judge friend said that the 4:30 service was relatively well attended, which for St. Peter's means somewhere around 60 to 70 people. So good. Now, my spy related to us that no readers had been assigned for the 9 o'clock in the evening service either, despite the judge and I having volunteered and been given email assurances. They'd let us know one way or the other. Note the phrase, one way or another. And she didn't know who had been dragooned into doing the reading at the 9 o'clock service. Now, interestingly, the choir sang at the 4:30 service, which traditionally, you know, historically up to now, that's not been the case. The choir would sing at the 9 o'clock service, or when we used to have it at 11 o'clock, the 11 o'clock in the night evening service. But apparently no choir was singing at the 9 o'clock service on Christmas Eve. I find that very strange. Is this just shaking up crap for shaking up crap's sake? Is this some sort of nonsense from the diocese? Is this some sort of brain explosion coming out of this guy's head? It's hard to say. Well, I guess I may even have opened 2 cans of worms now. So a general balls up for sure this Christmas Eve, leaving at least 2 somewhat the very pissed off experienced readers with their thumbs up their holes, and we're not having any fun either. Yeah, I said as much to the judge, and I said I was pissed off, and that's quote unquote. And he said, so was I. So was he. I mean, he was too. So it didn't have to be that way. The primary purpose of a church, meaning the first thing you have to do is you have to worship God well. All the other stuff flows from that. Helping the people who are, you know, poor and this and that. But before you start doing that, you have to worship God, and you ideally have to worship God as beautifully and as properly as you can. And part of that means in a church with a relatively set liturgy, rather than just coming in and making it up as you go along, is that you organize who's going to do what when. This did not happen during one of the 3 major holy days of the Christian church: Christmas, Easter, and Pentecost. Zippo. No planning. Now, it gets better. Of course, it always gets better here on the Joe Kersey channel. as the judge and I, well, and indeed the rector's wife, were getting ready to go out the back door and go home. In comes a guy that looks like a relatively well-dressed homeless man. Now, we often get homeless people wandering in, particularly during the colder times of the year, after a service to ask for help. You know, can somebody give me a ride down to the shelter in Columbus, or, you know, voucher for a meal, or that sort of thing. You know, so that's not unusual. And he was fairly well dressed. He had a nice wool shirt on, one of my favorite things to have on. And, well, when it's not 62 degrees outside right now. And it looked like what he had was a mashed, you know, how you have a half-used roll of toilet paper and you mash it down and then you can stick it in your front flat pocket. Looked all the world like a rolled of mashed up roll of toilet paper in this guy's front pocket. And he introduced himself, somewhat unusually for the initial contact with a homeless individual. And Henry and I introduced ourselves, and we shook his hand. Fine. And then he says, I want to get this right. Then he adds that he is the, and this is a quote, you know, you can't make this crap up, the Diocesan Recasting Process Liaison. It's so idiotic and insane. Let's say it again. The Diocesan Recasting Process Liaison. You can't make that kind of jargon up. He also, and then he proceeds to give us a ration of shit for having our front door locked. Well, the service was over. All but four people had left the church. So, of course, we locked the front door because we were going out the back door. We explained that to him. It didn't seem to take. No, you could see that once he had started in on his critique, all input receptors were turned off. Give me a break. Oh, I haven't said that nearly enough on... Give me a break. Now, you know, he wandered, while he was saying that, while he was identifying himself as such, the rector's wife was standing behind him. And this is something I hadn't appreciated about her before, but she has very expressive eyes, kind of like mine sometimes. She sort of stared over at Henry and myself and sort of went, it was at that point I decided that she's really increasingly sound, in my opinion. Because she didn't want to be here in the first place. She wanted to go down to Florida, you know, because this guy's supposed to retire. And then he gets this call from, you know, Lynn Carter douchebag, you know, the canon for interims or something at the diocese, you know. He says, oh, come to this church. Give me a break. Anyway, so he wanders off to find the rector, the interim rector. And she says, sort of quasi sotto voce, to Henry and me, says, oh, I hope there's not going to be another meeting. Very sound woman, this wife, this church wife, this clergy wife. So, there, that concludes, you know, I think we've, you know, there might still be a few worms hanging onto the end of the bobber out there in the lake or the creek, but that's pretty much all we can say for today. So I'm going to say, well, no, I'm not going to say that because yesterday, I had the great Skype with Tony Pincham, and then Tony BZ from Seattle chimed in with a visitor from Columbus, and we we had a good time for several hours. So there it is. There. Now I can say bye-bye, YouTube.